Welcome to the latest episode of the Class Color series, a series where we discuss the classes of Dungeons & Dragons through the lens of the Color Pie, all in order to gain a better understanding of these classes and in turn create more well-rounded and interesting characters. In this episode, we will be discussing the ever-popular class of the Rogue. Now, the interesting thing about the Rogue is that it's the one class that seems to accompany a party wherever it goes, sometimes pushing ahead into the front lines looking for traps and locked doors. Other times, it's in the shadows waiting to strike, or in some cases, it can be the very face of the party, using its clever tongue and street smarts to the party's advantage. Even outside of Dungeons & Dragons, we see the Rogue archetype time and time again, as we are naturally endeared to the scoundrel with the heart of gold. Because of this, the Rogue archetype is solidified in all of our minds, and each one of us has their own picture we conjure when we hear the word Rogue. In some cases, we imagine the assassin or killer for hire. In other cases, it's a character with a shady past who finds some kinship with the group. For me personally, when I imagine a rogue, I think of the type of character who's a bit of a wild card. Sure, they follow along, but only while it suits them. This dichotomy can lead to moments when the party is uncertain of whose side the rogue is on, but you have to accept this sort of behavior as really it's all they know and that's what they've relied on to survive. No matter what your idea of a rogue is, I intend to illuminate each one through the use of the color pie in this episode of the Class Color series. That way, when you build your next rogue, you'll have a better understanding of how to express their motivations. Before we do that though, I just want to give a special shout out to my Patreons. Your added support to this channel really means a lot. If you want to help support the channel and receive unique rewards, then click the link in the description and sign up today. If you're not in a position to become a Patreon, that's okay too. Honestly, your likes and kind comments are the fuel that keep me creating. Alright, with all of that said, let's get into the class colors of the Rogue, by first discussing the colors chosen by Wizards of the Coast. The difference between a simple thief and a true rogue is the culmination of ages spent honing its craft. It has been debated that it takes 10,000 hours to master a craft, and while this may be an exaggeration for you and I, it's the truth for the rogue. It is this dedication that proves to me that the rogue is clearly blue. That is, that it's not just mastery, but the concept at the core of blue, in that the rogue never reaches a cap on what it can work towards, and there's always something new to master, or a new skill or proficiency to learn. With all of that said, I would hesitate to say that blue is the one and only color at its core, as I do see another part of the whole picture. The other side of the rogue is displayed perfectly on the class card chosen for the rogue. Wizards of the Coast, and to be more specific, the Magic team, has decided that the rogue is blue-black. And I would have to agree. Why blue-black, you say? Well, if it isn't already obvious, then let me explain on what blue has started. Black is the color that feeds the rogue's motivations, while blue is the mechanism that it reaches its goals. The rogue needs black to be what it is, and to have survived as long as it has. In many cases, the rogue has lived a hard life, one that hardens it and creates an outlook which demands it only look out for number one. As we'll come to see, this isn't always the case, but I do think as a base, this is very accurate. So what does this look like when we put it all together? Well, the blue-black rogue is one that was given no chances in its early life, and has learned very quickly that the world is a hostile place, and people will take from you unless you take from them. This life isn't easy though, and it requires many skills. Because of this, the rogue perfects a mixture of practical skills and proficiencies that it hones over time. Skills that utilize the pathless tread, the swiftness of a blade, or in some cases, the use of magic. The rogue in this context believes it's better to never be seen than to face confrontation. It's better to pick a lock than ask to be let in, and it's more efficient to take a gold coin than earn it. This rogue has no illusions of heroism. It is practical, and these abilities are what has allowed it to not just survive, but to thrive. The blue-black rogue is aware that a mistake can cost you your life, and so the perfection of its skills is always top of mind. It's the combination of ruthless realization and constant improvement. To me, this is the ideal trope of the rogue, but there is so much more to be found. So let's dive into some of my own thoughts on what else the rogue can be. To do this, let's simply add white to our established core and see what we get with our first iteration. Now, when we add white to this combination, something new does happen. What we get in this case is a rogue who has a purpose outside of self-interest. Sure, they go about it with the same amoral resolve that black provides, yet it has a grander objective. Perhaps this rogue was purely blue-black when they were younger, but over time they've learned that they can put their skills to use for good, or at least for the good of their group. This rogue would have an easier time fitting into your party, as they have learned that there are those that exist who have their back, even if those allies number in the few, and they count you among them. In the case of the white, blue, black rogue, or Esper rogue as it's called in Magic, the blue present still provides the mechanism for its perfection and proficiency. Black is still the means to which it can get the job done, but no longer is the driving force of its motivations. For that, we look to white. In this instance, white is a balancing system. It keeps the rogue from acting selfishly and instead puts its various skills to use for a cause outside of itself. Perhaps this rogue has some sort of moral code and doesn't kill or steal indiscriminately. Instead, it focuses on those that do not deserve their wealth, or whom their lives bring upon suffering to others. Perhaps this rogue could be an assassin of slavers, a spy for their kingdom, or a thief of important objects. This rogue still hides in the shadows and does dirty work. It's just that it does not waste its efforts on petty crimes or acts of selfish greed. Now, as we can see, this shift from purely blue-black to Esper provides us with a turning point for the rogue. And in a lot of ways, I see this rogue as one who has lived a selfish life. But as age and experience has set in, they've come to learn that they are more than a terror in the shadows, and that their efforts can be more important and impact others in ways that is beneficial. In the end, through this mindset, they become a force for good, or at least one that aids those it deems kin. Alright, now that we've established this version of the rogue, I want to move things into a completely different direction. Let's shed both blue and white, but we'll still hold on to black, and then add in red to see what sort of rogue comes from these circumstances. This right here is such a fun version of the rogue. By tapping into certain aspects of both black and red, we come up with a character that is unpredictable, suave, and sometimes violent. Personally, I think this type of rogue is the most fun to play, and one we see across media all the time, with characters like Han Solo or Zorro. Their wit and charm comes from their red side, and yet they're quick to the draw or fast with the sword due to their black side. But let's break it down a little further to see exactly what I mean. As we're familiar with by now, black is the side of the rogue that is a realist, rooted in a possible tough upbringing where it was forced to use skills to survive. It understands that no one ever got anywhere by playing it nice. This rogue is a scoundrel through and through, and while this does not mean they're a thug out to do no good, they're still the kind of character that will not hesitate to take any advantage presented to them. Now, the part that makes this rogue unique and, well, fun stems from the inclusion of red. In this instance, it's the source of its charm, and of its inability to simply stand by when there's adventure or loot to be had. This can result in a rogue that is a swashbuckler, a sword fighter, or a con artist. They constantly put themselves into precarious situations and enjoy the thrill of finding a way out. The thing about red and black when they're combined is that you have a combination that almost runs away with itself, in that its black side gets an idea in its head, and then the red side is adamant on following it through to its fullest extent. A lot of times this means simple pleasures and instant gratification, but often in the case of the rogue, it manifests into someone who seeks out adrenaline, or someone who gains pleasure from charming or intimidating others. It's a hard and fast lifestyle that forces it to use every ounce of its skill to get itself out of the situations it places itself into. Now that we've gotten these very standard archetypes out of the way, I want to try something a little bit different for our final combination. For that, I'll strip away black completely, but we will now bring in white and blue to see what happens. I wanted to piece together this rogue to show that while I believe black shows up in the rogue 9 times out of 10, it isn't necessary when building your rogue. Instead, I want to lean into the other side of its core colors, in blue, and then pair it with strong motivators in white and red. Once again, let's break down the rogue and see why these colors work, and how in this context they make sense. First up is white. As we know, white is the color with strong convictions. It can be a force for equality, for humanity, or order. Of course, a rogue isn't much for order, so instead, let's look at how this works for ideas like equality and humanity. I could see this rogue stealing from the rich and giving to the poor. Perhaps they've been on the bad side of a power structure and now look to set things right by taking from those who take from the vulnerable. On the other end, it could be a rogue who looks to bring others together under their banner, to collect a group of outcasts who society has deemed unworthy for one reason or another. Then we add in blue, the color that is in many ways very straightforward, as it's the driving force for the rogue's perfectionism of its craft, and in some cases the source of its ability to learn some magic as well. Magic that is beyond the scope of any cut purse and would require immense dedication. Then we have red. This is where their ability to bring others in comes from. It's their charisma, their empathy, and to top it all off, their desire for adventure. When we bring this all together, we have a rogue who fights for those that cannot fight for themselves, and in doing so can actually rally others around them. In many cases, the rogue is a solo act, and that doesn't always have to be the case. They can be a presence of pure leadership. That is, if they lean into a sense of morality and adventure aided by their proficient hand. I believe that the white, blue, red rogue, or Jeskai rogue, makes for an interesting build, and is one that can bring something fresh to the table. Remember, the rogue doesn't always have to be a brooding edgelord. In this episode, we came to the conclusion pretty quickly that black and blue, when combined, make for a great core to the rogue. But in many ways, I could argue that either one of the two on their own does just as well as a core color. The interesting thing about this is that black on its own is in many ways the motivation or the backstory. When this color is present, it shows us that the rogue learned the hard way that life isn't going to hand you anything, and you must learn to take what you need. But to live this way, it needs blue to be the mechanism which facilitates the skills in which it uses to survive and to flourish. I'm sure you have noticed that there was one color missing from this video, which is unlike what we saw in previous episodes, and that color is green. Now, while I do think there is room for green, like I say in all of my videos, there's room for every color, but in the case of the rogue, I think it's more of an edge case, which is fine for some classes, as some are so defined in what they represent. But I don't want you to think that green is excluded all of the time, as I'm sure you could find ways to work it into your character. But in the end, to me, green denotes a ranger more than a rogue. As always though, let's go through each color and see how they are reflected in the context of the rogue. First up, we have white. White, in the perspective of the rogue, is the sort of moral compass that sets them on a path that is less selfish. This may reflect in a rogue who is a bit older and perhaps has seen their actions have consequences. Or perhaps it's a rogue who works within a bigger organization or a guild. One who at least looks out for those it deems friends. Next, we have blue, a color that is in many ways essential to the rogue. Sure, you may not apply this every time, but I do believe that this represents the vast skills of the rogue and the training required to reach its heights. Then there is black, a color that is just as much part of the rogue as blue, perhaps even more so, as the rogue usually comes to this profession because of a mindset built at a young age, one that has seen all that life has to offer and understands that it is an inherently selfish place, and only those willing and able to take what they want get anywhere. Then there is red, a color that can either be a tool or a source of adventure. In the first case, the rogue might use his charm and empathy to manipulate others, or to intimidate, to con them, or to gain the upper hand in a tough situation. On the other hand, it could reflect more in the type of rogue who's an adventure seeker, a swashbuckler, a sword fighter. Red within a rogue is really what produces the type of rough and tumble character we all love. Finally, there's green, a color I could almost remove from this equation, but I won't, as there is a space for every type of rogue, and I don't want to discourage you from using it. So what would green mean for a rogue? Green, in the context of the rogue, is perhaps someone who uses their skill set to sabotage the unnatural creations of man. Or perhaps it's a character who carries on the traditions of those who taught them. In the end, it's fine for there to be colors that don't quite fit every class. And I think a class like the rogue is so defined that colors outside of black, blue, and red become a bit tricky. No matter how you build your rogue though, it's important to think about how they use their skills and why. Did something in their past cause them to take the higher road or the dark alley? Do they pick the pockets of unsuspecting victims or from those who take from the poor? Do they swing their sword for a hit of adrenaline, or do they stalk the shadows using magic to pull keys from back pockets? In the end, it's all about mechanisms and motivations. So as long as you keep those points in mind, I'm sure your next rogue will be a more robust and interesting character. I really hope you're enjoying this series so far because I'm having a ton of fun making it. Special thanks once again to my newest Patreons, Phil Kearney and Bryce Carlson. If you want to become a Patreon and vote on the next video topic along with many other perks, then links as always are in the description. Alright, with that friends, I'll catch you in the multiverse. Bye.